right? Let's now, before we do view reservation, we finished the view movies. Let's talk about the reserve movies, right? Let's see how can we tackle this. So as we said that in reserve movies, let's close this, right? In the logged in account, we're gonna add the reserve movie input or reserve inputs, reservation inputs, name it whatever you want to name it. It's called reserve movie inputs, right? And reserve movie inputs is going to be calling a couple of doing a couple of other things. It's gonna take inputs for, if you remember from the sketch here, it's gonna take input for deciding which movie. So we're gonna pick the movie first. So let's say that this is gonna call internally a function or a method that's called pick movie, right? And let's see, let's write that function. So let's say that this is defined reserve movie inputs, right? And notice that this is the kind of method that we would call if the command was found to be reserve movies. So we are essentially going to call from the login controller. Let's just say that we are going to call, for the time being, we're going to call reserve movie inputs, right? And I don't know, we don't know how things will go. So for the time being, this is what you are doing. So we're calling reserve movie inputs, all right? Okay. So let's see what reserve movie input will have. It should, first of all, we should ask the user to pick the movie. Okay, to pick the movie. So let's have a function that is called define pick movie, right? And this pick movie is going to show the actual movie names, right? I don't need all of the details, right? I just need the movie name, right? Just the movie name. I don't need all of that from movie details, right? So let's say that we have a print statement that, first of all, this is the first step. So choose a movie from the menu. Let's tell him to select a number. All right. So let's say that now we're gonna take the input, and that input should represent the movie ID. It's gonna be a number, right? Remember, in movies.json, we said that first movie is in hold number 1. So typically, if the user chose movie ID number 1, then he chose this movie, and so he chose the whole number 1, right? That's the point of having everything aligned like that. All right. So we are going to take the movie ID as an input, but first of all, let's display the movie names. So let's go to movie class and continue the definition of view movie names. So for every movie, let's say that I am going to do something like this. I'm going to print, I want to have something like, imagine with me, I want to have something like, for example, 1, right? This is what I want to see printed. For example, 1, the first movie, which is Murder on the Orient Express, right? And then we have 2, right? Wonder, that was the second movie on the movies.json. There's Murder on the Orient Express and Wonder. So I want to have some kind of structure like this. So I want this to be generated or incremented, this index, right? We can do this in many ways. You can say that we have an I of 1, and we can say that this is the F string, and this is going to be I, and by the end of the loop, let's just increment that I by 1. And remember, I told you that there is a neater way to do that using the enumerate method or function. And how did we spell that? Let me search for it. Python enumerate. I don't really know how it's spelled, honestly. All right, so that's the method. Now this is gonna return two things. It's gonna return, all right, it's gonna return the actual dictionary, like that movie. So it's gonna return the actual dictionary, and it's going to return an index, right, which typically starts at 0. So this is the index, and this is the dictionary. Now what I want to print is the following. I want to say that I don't want to start the index from 0. I want to start the index just as like the JSON file from 1. So this is the first movie, right? I plus 1. And let's just write here the movie name. So from movie, get me the movie name, like that. All right, and I can add here held in whole number. Remember, the whole number is the same as the movie ID number, so I can just say I plus 1 as well, like this. And I can just indent this inside, so I'm just gonna use tabs, and this is gonna get me the movie name from every movie, right? I can just end up finish by returning all of the movies list that we have inside this function, and we're gonna use it. You're gonna see why we are returning that movies list in a minute. Okay, this movies list that basically has all the records, all the dictionaries, like so. Right, so going back to the boundary, right? So I'm going to access the movie object from the controller, from the logged in account controller, which has, remember, the logged in account controller has a movie object and has an account object. This is what I'm concerned here. I want to access the movie object, and I want to view movie names. We call this view movie names inside the movies, right? All right. So this is gonna print what we wanted to print, and it's gonna return the list of movies as well. And let's have a dictionary that is called M. Now I can say that if the user entered a movie ID, right? If the user entered a movie ID, let's say something like this is the dictionary that I have. If the movie entered something like that, right? That has, for example, murder in on the Orient Express, right? And here wonder, right? We can make this dictionary manually, and we can actually make a loop that actually fill in these kind of things. Like we can make a loop that fill in these values for us. So I'm just gonna comment this out, and we can have a loop that for movie and movies, right? I'm just gonna say that I'm gonna open an entry in the inside dictionary, right, with the index. Like index is going to be starting at 1. So where is that index? From the same enumerate method or function, right? So get me that I plus 1 because it starts at 0, and put that movie name inside that dictionary, right? Once this is done, you're gonna have all of your desired values inside this empty dictionary, but we can't see it for the time being, like this. Right? And once the user chooses from that list that is being printed the movie ID, I'm gonna check, is that movie ID inside that dictionary that we have just created or not? Right? So if from that dictionary I try to get that movie ID, if this returns something, let's say, right? So if it returns something, this means that the user have chosen a movie that is valid, right? He chose a movie from the list. Then we would just return that movie ID, right? Because we're going to use it further in the system. Else, we would just return none, meaning that the choice that he made is not valid, right? So the first thing we're going to do is that we're going to call pick movie like this, and pick movie is essentially going to return a movie ID. Well, if the movie ID that the user chooses from here is valid, then we actually have a movie ID. If movie ID is not valid, then we can just print something like invalid movie, right? Invalid movie. Right? Invalid movie. So we can tell him, please choose a valid movie from the list, right? And there's no need to continue the function, so we can just return none to end up the function from continuing execution. Remember that reserve movie inputs, where is it? Reserve movie inputs actually is going to call pick movie, it's going to call pick time, it's going to call pick seats, right? So if one of them, like in the first phases, if the movie name and whole number were not valid, then there is no need to continue and pick time and pick seats, right? So we're just gonna return none here, right? And notice something, that if the movie ID was valid, this actually is equivalent to the whole number, since if you remember in the system the movie ID is the same as the movie number or the whole number, and we said that the whole number is actually only, each whole number is playing only one movie, right? So that's the idea here. All right, so let's say that the movie ID is actually found to be valid, and we're gonna continue and pick the time for that reservation to be fully done, right? So I'm gonna here define pick time. I just wanna edit this prompt here. So let's just say choose a movie, and let's tell him select a number from the list, and I'm just gonna use the same thing in this one, and here choose a timing. Why did I write this in all caps? Select a number from the list as well, right? And let's say that we have a dictionary that is going to be like that. The dictionary have the first option as 5 p.m. We said that we are going to be having fixed times. So we said that we have only 5 p.m., 8 p.m., and 11 p.m. right? So this is gonna be 8 p.m., 3 is going to be 11 p.m., and so on, right? Then we are going to print all of these for you know what, let me just, all right, let's do the following. For t in the dictionary t, we are going to print, let's just indent this with a double taps as well, like we have done with the movie names here. Okay, then we can say something like this is for example 1, this is I. Okay, so this is gonna be the number. Why didn't I have brackets here? This is just the number, which can be the key. So this is just the key, right? And we have here the actual value, which is going to be 1 for, you know, 1 for 5 p.m. and 2 for 8 p.m. and so on, right? And we are gonna ask him to input that number. This is gonna be a number. So we store this in let's call it time, right? So if time, if I try to remember that time is basically, it's going to be the key. It's going to be either 1 or 3 or 2, right? So if I try to access that T dictionary with time and I found something, then I'm just going to return that time that the user have chosen, which is in this case the value of the time, which is 5 p.m., 8 p.m., or 11 p.m., right? Else I'm just going to return none as well, right? So let's here call self.pick time, and let's return store the returned time, which is can be none or can be the actual value, the actual timing. If not time, then we're gonna do the same thing here. Okay. So invalid timing. Please choose a valid timing from the list. Right, so per our discussion, we said that after the movie name, whole number, time, let's now pick the seats, right? So this is the third thing to do. Pick seats. And this is going to be a little bit needs some work to do. So pick seats here, like that. You know that seats, if you remember the structure of the data, you're gonna see that these seats were actually inside the holes.json. So we need to create the holes.json, right? So let's go and go to the testing here. Let's say that this is holes, and this is gonna be a list of dictionaries. Let's say that this is the first hole, so whole number. And notice that I'm trying to be consistent, because in movies, the JSON, we have whole number written like this. In holes, I'm gonna have whole number written the same way, right? So this is the first whole number. Notice that because this is gonna be annoying in just a minute, this is at index of 0, right? So this is the first element, so you can find the whole number 1 at index of 0. Remember that, right? And now let's talk about the movie that is being held. Let's call it movie held here, right? In hole number 1. So hole number 1 holds the movie Murder on the Orient Express. So I'm just gonna copy this right there. Okay. All right, but you know, for the sake of consistency, I'm just gonna have this as movie name, just as there is movie name inside movies. And let's have seats like that. Let's have the seat as a dictionary, like the one that we have mentioned earlier. So I'm going to have 16 seats, right? This is going to be annoying to watch, so I'm just going to pause the video. I'm just going to do the first couple of ones. So let's say that if the movie is not reserved, it's going to have a value of 0. If it's reserved, it's going to have a value of 1. So by default, all of them are not going to be reserved. All right. And notice that you don't have to do this, but for the sake of consistency, I want all of the keys to be strings. So I'm just gonna have everything as a string like that. All right. So I finished copying and pasting. Okay. So we have the 16 seats. Let's have another value or column for the what we call the times or the timings. And this is going to be just a list, and this list is going to have 5 or 3 values. I'm just going to write them vertically like that, like this. All right. Okay, and I'm just going to call this times. I think this is better. So this is the first whole. Okay, let's do the rest of the whole. So this is whole number 1. This is the second whole, which is going to host the movie name Wonder. Same number of seats, same number of timings, and we are going to do the same thing for the last whole. And this is whole number 3, and it's hosting movie Coco. Okay, and that's it. Now let's write this. I think we have imported JSON already, so let's open up a file and let's call this holes.json. in the writing mode as file, and let's just dump these values inside that file. You're gonna see the file here, Control S, and this is your actual values. Okay, so I'm just gonna take this guy, put it in my project folder, and now we have the holes. Let's do the reservation class. Okay, how about we do the reservation class? Alright, so let's do the reservation class really quick. I'm gonna go there and create a file, call it reservation.py. And before we do this, let's make a reservation.json, a data file for the reservations. There's no need to use the Jupyter Notebook and json.dump. You can just do this reservations.json, right? And it's gonna have by default an empty list, so empty list like that, and Control S, and that's it. Right? We don't have any reservation for the time being, so let's say that this is the reservation class. Is this recording? Yeah, reservation. Right, and we are going to have all of the list of the reservations from the reservation.json, which is in this, where is it? It's this guy. It has nothing, but we are going to need it anyway to write in it, right? So I'm going to use a DB handler object. So from stored files, import stored files. Alright, and we are going to create an object from reservations.json. I hope just that I've written this correctly, reservations, okay? And it should have the holes as well. Remember what we've said here? We've said that reservation is going to have all of the data inside the reservation.json, which is in this case an empty list, and it's gonna have all of the data from the holes.json, right? Which is in this case, this is the holes.json that we have just created in a minute earlier. So stored files, get me the data inside holes.json, which is in this case data, all of these data. All right, and let's have a reservation count, right? And that reservation count is not going typically to be a 0, right? It's going to be following the reservation ID inside the reservation.json, right? So what is, like, remember, this is going to be a list of dictionaries, and every dictionary represents a record, represents a specific reservation that has been made, and every reservation is going to be a key like that, right? So if there are stuff, if that list of reservation is not empty, then we would look for the last reservation. Imagine like you have a reservation of number 1, and this list of dictionaries, or this dictionary, you have multiple reservations, so you have multiple records. I want to have this aligned. You have multiple records, you have reservation 1, 2, and 3. So you would want to get the last reservation made, right? And the last reservation made can be found at index of -1, because remember, all of these are inside the list. So we have 3 elements in that list. So the last element at index of -1, right? So get the last element and get the reservation ID, and that reservation ID is going to be the count, the initialized count value. Right, so here we can say something like if holes.getAll, right, whenever we get the reservations.getAll, so when we get the content of reservations.json, if it is empty, which is the default case like that, if it is empty, so if the length of the thing of the list that is being returned is basically less than 1, right? If it is less than 1, meaning that the length is 0, right? Then we will set the account or the reservation account into 0, right? Else, if we have some length, then we would get the last element from that returned list, right? And last element is a dictionary. From that dictionary, get the reservation ID. But I'm not gonna use the underscore here. Right, so we're gonna delete this. It's just gonna be a res ID. Get the res ID, and this guy is going to be my actual res count, right? Now let's start the constructor and let's go back to the reservation.json and notice that it should be empty by default. I was just doing that for clarity and illustrating what I mean. So let's have the constructor have the following values. So we have a reservation ID that is going to be solely dependent on the reservation count, right? And we have seats, and we have time, and what do we have else? We have a whole number. Okay, so this is the reservation class. We said it has all of these things, and of course it has set reservation info, it has reset res info, right? So it's gonna reset everything into nones. It has set reservation info, and this is gonna have a couple of arguments, right? As typically it's going to have the seats, it's going to have the time, it's going to have the whole number. Okay, so it's gonna have the seats, the time, the whole number. All of these will be entered as an input from the user. What about the reservation ID? The reservation ID, as we've discussed before, is going to be set by a specific method. Let's call this set reservation ID. All right. And set reservation ID, what it's going to do is that it's going to access that class variable from that class name, right? Incremented by 1, whether it's like we don't have, that's the first reservation, or whether we had reservation from before, incremented by 1, and let's just set that self reservation ID. All right, let me just remove all of that underscore like that. Okay, and reservation like this, and set it into reservation ID. And this is what we are going to call when we set the reservation ID. And this is basically an instance method, so it needs self. Right, so let's create this in Lucidchart. Before we do that, let's just go to the account now and let's import that reservation, and let's create that reservation object inside account. Okay, so let's make this class. Okay, so let's just take this like that here. Okay, reservation. So this is gonna have a couple of things. It's going to have reservations, which is reservations to JSON, and holes to JSON, holes, right? It's going also to have a reservation count as a class variable, like that, right? And this is gonna reservation ID, a time, a seats, and this seats is gonna be the list, and that list, I don't know how many numbers, but let's say that's gonna be multiple elements inside that list. What else do we have? We have a whole number, so that's there, and so far that's it. Okay, and we have set reservation info, and this is gonna take seats, whole number, time, and we have reset reservation info as well. And what else do you have? We have set res ID, which is used inside set reservation info. So set reservation okay, so that's a reservation. We don't need this movie stuff, we just copied that from there, right? And this set reservation ID doesn't take any of these guys, and that's just a composition inside account. So that's going to be composition, and we added some stuff to account. I forgot to do that. We added has reservation, which is a boolean. We added reservation object, which is of type reservation, like so, and that's it. Okay, that is it. All right. Okay, and for anyone who's wondering, we can just have this length as 0, by the way. You don't have to have it like that, right? And let's just go back to the boundary or the UI, and let's say that we are going to call pick seats, right? So we are going to call self.pick seats, and just like pick movie return the movie ID and the pick time return the time, then pick seats should return the actual seats that the user will choose, right? So this is pick seats, right? One obvious thing that pick seats should do at the beginning is that it should view the available, or view all seats, right? View all seats. So we are going to call view all seats. So the reservation should have a method that views all seats. So let's call this view seats. And I'm going to warn you from now, you can skip this part, this view seats method, because it's really annoying. It's not that straightforward, right? But notice something. If you open up holes.json, you're gonna see that yes, there are 16 seats in every hole. That's true, right? But you don't know which seats from each hole that are reserved and which are not, right? So you might have that in the first hole this is reserved and this is reserved, only 2 seats. From the second hole nothing is reserved, and so on, right? So this view seats, it should view the seats based on the whole number that is being sent. That's one. And let's write this in Jupyter Notebook just to see how this looks, because it's gonna look really ugly. It's not gonna be that straightforward. So let's open up the Jupyter Notebook that we have closed from earlier. And I'm going to work on that holes that I have here, this list. Okay, this is the list that I'm working on. And let's define this as a function, and I'm going to modify this inside the reservation in just a minute. Let's just call this view seats, and this takes a whole number because that's not a class method anymore, it's just a function, right? Why am I doing this? Because I just wanted to see how things will look like, and afterwards, after we figure out the actual code for this function, I'm just going to dump it inside that method here. All right, So first of all, let's use that holds, right? Let's use that holds here. So I'm going to use that holds, right? And let's pass it. You know what? Let's just pass it to that function. So we have the actual holds and we have the given whole number. So when we call that function, we would call it like that. We use sheets and give it the actual holds and give it the whole number, which is, for example, whole number one or something like that. All right. Okay, so let's have a print statement at the beginning, and let's have it saying something like I don't know, have this like that whole number, and let's give this the whole number like that the user will enter. Okay, and you know what, let's say that the whole number, remember that in the holds.json we have the whole number 1 at index of 0. Right, so let's say that we will code this in a way that the entered number is actually the index. So if we entered an index of 0, this where is it? This is the whole, the first whole that is being reserved, that is being viewed. So if the index of 0, then this is the whole that is being viewed. Right, so this is called this whole number index. So having the whole number index plus 1 gives you the actual whole number. And I'm just gonna terminate this with a couple of symbols, right? And let's have a while loop, right? Let's say okay, so let's say that this is the counter of the loop, right? And while I is less than, let's start from 1, since the first seat we have is at 1, right? So while I is less than the length of the following, see, you can actually have the length of a dictionary. A length of a dictionary is going to return the number of keys that that dictionary, of the number of pairs that that dictionary will have. So if I say something like check the length from that holds list, remember this is the holds, all of this is a list by the end of the day, right? From that holds list, check the element number 1, which is at index of 0, so this is the element number 1, and check the dictionary that is called seats, right? And check the length. It's going to tell you that the length is 16, so this dictionary has 16 pairs, right? So while this is typically what I'm going to use here. While I is less than, we didn't finish the seats that we have, right? But that index is not going to be 0. It's going to be the index that the user specifies. So the user wants to view the seats in the first hole, right? So this is index of 0, right? While I is less than that, we are going to display these seats. Okay, so I here represents the number of seats, so we start from I of 1 till the last element, right? So let's try to print something here. Let's try to print actually I, right? And let's give a width. Remember the this code, it's the same code that we've used in the print the first 50 primes in the programming lab. I think the programming lab number 5, week 5, right? So I'm going to have a width between every printed value and the other of 5 spaces, 5 white spaces, right? And I'm going to put decimal or D, meaning that this value here is a number. And notice that if this was a string, this wouldn't work. This needs to be a number. So you space every integer or every decimal with 5 white spaces. Now that I is an integer because I've started I as a 1 like that, so that's an integer, right? And I'm going to print this, and I'm going to print them like beneath or beside each other like that, right? And maybe I would say something like all right, let's just see how this would go, and let's increment that I. Okay, so this is how it looks like. These are the seats. So we can just print the seats before them, like before, like that. Let's say print seats like this. And that's typically not what we want to happen, but let's have this outside. Okay, so let's have this outside. Let's have something like an end here, right? To not go another new line. It's gonna be stick to it. So I'm just gonna have a tab like there. And let's try to print this one more time. So this is the kind of number of seats that we have, but notice that the last element is not with us. So I'm just gonna put an equal sign. All right, so let me have a space here. All right, not so bad. All right, that's acceptable. Now we want to have this in a form of a cube. Like I've did this number 16 for that actual purpose, to have something like a square. Did I say a cube? A square like that. This is what I want to see printed. So this is seat number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So you have in every row you have 4 seats being printed. So in every line we have only 4 seats being printed like that. So let's see how can we do that, right? Right? So in order to have this 4 seats per line, we can just have a variable and call it seats per line, right? And put this as 0, right? And every time the loop happens, and every time we print something, if we print 4 times, so the loop have it 4 times, right? Then we should have like seats per line equal to 4. So every time the loop happens, I'm just gonna increment that seats per line like that. And once seats per line reaches the value of 4, then I'm going to go into a new line and I'm going to initialize that seats per line into 0 one more time. So let's check this out. And you're going to see that that's almost what we want, but not exactly, because we have that seats at the beginning. Right? So after we go a new line, we can just print. Let me just copy this. After we go a new line, we can just have this like there. And it should work for now, right? There is an excess right there, but these are the actual seats, right? So let's just remove this guy. All right, so let's leave that excess for now. We're gonna delete it at the end. So once these are basically the keys, the keys, there is no values, there is no actual values. These zeros are not showing for the time being, right? So after we go a new line, let's talk about how we can print the values. Now, if you think about it, each one of these seats has a value. So we have a value for 1, 2, and 3, and 4. We have a value for 5, 6, and 7, and 8, right? So let's say that there is an inner loop that's going to print the values for the first 4. And that inner loop counter should start from 1 and goes up to 4, right? So that inner loop is going to go for 4 times. Right? So let's say that this is the inner loop counter that's going to get the values, right? And after we go a new line, right, we can print the word taken to just see if this taken is going to be representing either 0 or 1, if the seat is available or not, right? And let's say that there is no new line is going to be printed. And now let's start our loop, right? Let's say for x and, for example, range, right? And that inner loop should start from the value of 1. It should start from 1 to 4. So from j, which is equal to 1 here, up to j plus 4, right? So now we want to get the values, and this is the ugly part, to be honest, right? So we would access the list. We would access the list, then we would access the actual index, and after we have the index, we were gonna access the seats. That's the dictionary, right? So from the dictionary, get me the seats. Now we want to get the value that should be under 1, right? So we need to have the key of 1, but that key is a string, right? That key can be found in x. X starts at 1, so that key is x, but remember, we have said that x, all of these are going to be representing x, but these are strings, so I'm just going to cast this into a string like that, right? So this is going to return to me the value that the seed number 1 has, which is in this case 0. Right? And let's do the same thing. So all of these are going to return just 0, right? And once we have that 0, I'm just going to have it aligned via the same width right there. So it's going to be aligned by 5 white spaces, and there's no new lines. Okay, I think this would do the trick. There is a small problem. Yeah, let's have this as a single quote because there's an outer double quotes here. Let's check this out. Now that's not typically what we look for. Like, this is correct. We have this the seats values under the seats numbers, but there is something wrong that's going on here. So let's take away that end here. Okay, it still doesn't work. So let's see what's the problem. Well, I believe the previous one, that should do the trick, right? If we have the end being opened, there is no new line, so it works for the first row of seats. That's it. So what we should do now, what we should do is the following. First of all, we need to update the J. J here represents the actual key. So we started the key of 1 and we went 1, 2, 3, right, up till 3. So 1, 2, 3, right? And I think, let me just test something. Let's say that this is 3 is going to be 1, right? Let me just see. Oh, let me just do that here at the first index. So this is 3 as 1, right? And it's going over and over. That's not true. So let's say that this is 4 is going to be 1 as well. So it's working. So you have 1, 2, 3. Notice that we have incremented this with 4, so the J is 1. Now we are going from 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's it, because 1 plus 4, you have an ending of 5, and you're gonna have 5. So we have the first 4 seats, right? Now we want to make sure for the next couple of 4 seats, we start the J at, in this case, we start the J at 5. Right? So we want to make sure after this loop finishes that we increment the J with 4 to be actually 5. So the next time it starts at 5, increments with 4, so it's going from 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. There is no 9 with you. So 5 plus 4 is going to be 9, and there is no 9 with you, right? So let's check this out. And I think it makes sense here, but still that this printing that you're seeing here. So I think after this is being printed, this line is being printed, we can just say that we are going to print a new line like that, and this should do the trick. But we want to differentiate. We want to have a separator between every seats and their taken values and the other row. So I'm just gonna have it like that. Alright, so this is the first seat, and they're taking values, seats, and taking values, and so on, right? And what do we see here? So let's try to give 9 a 1, and we have 1 at 3 and 4. So 3 and 4 are taken. 9 is taken. Let's try the last row. Let's say that seat 15 and seat 13 are taken as well. So seat 13 and seat 15 are taken. Now we don't really want to see this annoying thing here, so we can just say we can just say if we've reached the last iteration, so if I was the last iteration, right, then we would break before we do that print. So if I found to be 16, we can just break like that, and we don't have that last seed in front of us, but we don't have 16 as well. That's annoying. Okay, so the trick here is just to have the increment at the end. I think this will do the job. Oh yeah, that does the trick. Okay, so this is my function. I told you that this is annoying and you could have skipped this, but it's just there if you want to watch it. So let's copy this function and put it in the reservation method, right? So we don't really need to have holes passed, since we can just say something like, if you want holes, we can have it internally by getting the actual holes content from that object, right? So that object is inside reservation. Get that object, a class variable, right? And get all. Now we have all of the holes. Okay. Now let's call this whole number index like this to align everything up. And what else do we need? We want to access the holes, right? I think this is it. I think that's it. So let's try and just write some driver code to test this function or method. So let's create a reservation object. Now let's say r.viewSeats and give it the index of 0. Alright, it works. It works. Now there's some, why is 9 is 1? We shouldn't have anything reserved. No, should be not reserved. That's not reserved as well. Nothing is reserved. Okay. And that's it. So let's run again. Nothing is reserved. And this is it. Okay, so just comment this out. That's typically the reservation. Now let's go to the account UI, and let's say that we want to view all seats whenever we pick seat, right? And for order to view all seats, you need to access the reservation object, which can be found inside the account inside the login controller. So from the login controller, I think this is not the first time we do this, or is it? Yeah, that's the first time. All right, so from the login controller, get the account object. Notice that inside the login controller, we have the account object, and inside the account itself, we have a res object that has the reservation, which can give you all of these goodies. View seats here. So let's go back to the UI. So get me the reservation object, right? And get me view seats. And view seats takes a whole number index, right? So this method should accept a whole number index to pass it along its child function that is being called, right? So this is view seats. Okay. So let's say that this is gonna take a whole number index, right? And remember something. The movie ID that we have picked from pick movie, actually in the movies.json, it corresponds to what? It corresponds to the actual whole number. So if we want to actually get the whole number from holes.json to get the actual whole number 1, which corresponds to movie ID number 1, which this whole sits at the index of 0, so you can just say something like whole number equals MID minus 1, right? And let's send that whole number index to that pick seats. All right, so let's try this now. Just to recap the flow here, Whenever you enter a reply that is a remove or a reserve movie, this is going to be printed, and then inside the loop, handle inputs is going to handle the command when it's remove reserve movie. It's going to call reserve movie inputs. Reserve movie inputs is going to call pick movie, and pick movie is going to view the movie names and is going to show you a list. Whenever you choose something that is inside that list, if that number is inside that list, then it's going to be valid and it's going to return that movie ID. And then if things go well, we will be asked for pick time. Now pick time is going to show you these elements. If you picked a valid key, then it's going to return that time for you, right? If things go well, we should have the whole number index by having the movie ID, right? Which is the whole number index is basically the index where the whole number dictionary or the whole dictionary falls in. So the first whole number 1 is at index of 0. So if we have the movie ID, we just can subtract by 1 and get the whole number index. If we have the whole number index, we can call pick seats. What the first thing pick seats is gonna do is that it's gonna call view seats within that, using that whole number index. All right, so let's just try this in the Bootstrap, the main script. Let's say login. Let's say reserve movie. What is the problem here? Inside movie names. Oh, there's a quotation around this. That's a key. So let's go to movie. That's a key like that. Let's do this one more time. And how about we do the following? Let's go to hold to JSON. Let's say in the first hole we have 1, 2, 3 seats are reserved. In the next hole, let's say that we have 4, 5, 6 are reserved. In the third hole, we have 9, 10, and 11 are reserved. All right. So let's say that this is the login. Let's say reserved, and let's pick the first movie, which is in hole number 1 at index of 0. It doesn't matter the time, it's not going to affect it. So let's see these seats here. Oh, we entered an invalid time. That's why we never got to see the seats. All right. So let's again, that index movie 1, anytime. This is at hole number 1, which is at index of 0. And we said that it has the first 3 seats reserved. Now let's check the second movie at hole number 2 at index of 1. Anytime will work. So at hole number 2 we have 4 and 5 and 6, and this has 4, 5, 6 being reserved. And finally, let's say the third movie, anytime would do. Third movie have 9, 10, and 11. 9, 10, and 11 reserved, so it works. And we have hole number 3, so everything is mapping correctly. All right. Now let's talk about reserving. All right, so we can view the seats. Now this is the time to get the user, or give the user the ability to reserve the desired seat numbers, right? So how can we do that? Okay, so this is recording. So before reserving the seat, first of all, we would want to, let's say that we would want to check if the seats are available or not, right? Let's leave that reserved for later. Let's leave the reservation for later, right? Let's leave the reservation happens inside reserve movie input. So let's say that this pick seats does one thing or two things, viewing all seats, and it also checks for the availability of the seats, right? So we would have a method inside the reservation object, inside the reservation class, that is called or let's call it check seat available, right? Check seat available is going to take, let's say it's gonna take two things. It's gonna take the whole number, and it's gonna take the seats list that the user will enter, right? So from where do we get that seat list? Let's say that we are going to ask the user first of all, let's say that we are going to have a print statement like this, telling him that this is the third thing that he would do after picking the movie, picking the time. C would be, since we have A and B, so C would be choose seats, right? And I think that's enough. And let's give him an input message and tell him multiple seats are separated by white spaces, like so. Right, so we're gonna take this as an input, right, as a string, and split it over white spaces. And once this is split into white spaces, we can now say that we are going to map these elements into integers and put them in a list format. Now that seats list is going to be sent to check seat available, right? And that whole number index is going to be sent into check seat available as well. So let's define check seat available inside the reservation class. So let's say that this is called check seat available, and it takes two arguments, whole number index, and it has the seats list, right? So let's have this as seats list just for consistency. And we need all of the holes, so I'm just gonna say get me from that class variable holes object, get me all of the holes content inside the holes.json. And let's say for every seat number inside seats list, notice that that seat list is going to be something like, the user is going to enter something like this. It's going to enter 1, 2, 3. These are the seats. It's going to be splitted over white spaces, and these are strings. So it's going to be splitted like so, and stored inside a list. And then this map is gonna take this list of strings and map it into integers. So we're gonna end up with something like that. So these are the seats numbers that is going to be sent into check seat available. So what is being entered into check seat available is that seat list as the second argument, and the first argument is the whole index number. And if we're talking about whole index number, so index of 0 means that we're talking about whole number 1. All right. Anyways, so for every seat number in that list, let me see, is that seat number, when we access holes that we have here, when we access holes by the whole number index, and we access the dictionary that is that we have, that like every dictionary from holes, so this is the first dictionary. So when we access the key in that dictionary, which is seats, which gives you another dictionary, so we have another dictionary, right? When we have that dictionary, if I try to do the following, giving that I have that seat number, which in this case I'm gonna start with the seat number, which is 1, right? If in that key, which is inside seat number, which is 1, in holes, right, if it had something that is not 0, which is in this case means 1, right? So if it had something that is not 0, means that it is reserved, then I would tell that customer or that user that the seat is unavailable, right? This seat, or let's say seat number, and let's have this an if string, seat number, that current number that we are at is reserved by someone, or is already reserved, right? And let's tell him something like, please choose a different seat. All right, and we don't have to continue. You can actually have the loop still, you can have an inner loop that asks for the user to pick another seat, right? But I'm just gonna make this as simple as possible, and I'm going to like um, terminate the function and return something like false. Okay, so that's not actually one, it's gonna be a seat number like that. But remember, seat numbers or the keys here are strings, and that seat number that is being sent is basically an integer, right? So one would say, why did we even bother to map this into an integer? Yes, you have a point. If you didn't want to map it, you wouldn't have to do what I will do right now, which is cast it again into a string, right? So you don't have actually to do this map right there. Where is it? You don't have to do this map, right? And just send these list of strings like so. But anyways, so if any of the numbers, any of the list that we have sent, which is 1 or 2 or 3, if any of them were copied or unavailable, we're gonna just halt everything and tell him that he cannot reserve that seat, that specific seat. So enter the make the process of the reservation all over again, right? So if we broke out of that loop and we didn't terminate, that means that all of the seats that he chose were actually available. All right, so we're just gonna tell him that seats available. All right, so we're gonna tell him that seats and that seats list are available. What did I wrote here? Available. Is it available? What a word, man. That's it. Available or not available. So available. That's it. Yes. Okay. And that's about the check seat available method. All right. Now, what if the seats were available? Let's just discuss the what will happen when this finishes, right? So we should return something. We should return true. I totally forgot about that. Okay. So let's go back to the UI. So if check seat available, I don't want it to be like that. Anyways, that's the formatter that is doing this. So if check seat available returned, it's gonna return true, right? Or valid, or seat available or not. So this is gonna return, I'm gonna return whatever this is gonna return, right? So it's gonna return if the seat is available or not, true or false. So typically the pick seats is going to return if the seat is available or not. So pick seat is going to return if the seats available or not. That's it. And if they were available, then it's gonna return true, right? And if it's true, then I want to have that seats that the user has chose, right? So I'm going to return as well the seats list. So if it's available or not, it's gonna return the seats list. So pick seats is gonna return the seats list, and if these seats are available or not. So it's gonna be, this is gonna be true or false, accompanied with the actual seats that the user has entered as inputs, and we have checked them whether they were available or not, and the actual number of seats in the list, right? So if this is true, if seats available was actually, let's say if it's not true, right? If it is not true, then we would tell him something like invalid seats. Please choose a seats that are not copied by someone else. All right, and we would just terminate that function, right? If it is available, then we would start at the process of reserving the seats, right? So we would go and define a method that is called reserve seats, and reserve seats is gonna take the whole number as well. Let's say the whole number index, and it's gonna take the seats list. All right. Now notice that reserve seats will never be executed unless this check seat available is returning true. So unless this is true, this is going to be reserved. So once the seat available is true, which is going to be returned from pick seats, which is going to be returned from check seat available, which is inside pick seats. So if this is true, we're gonna immediately reserve. So I'm reserving with the knowledge that these seats that I'm reserving are absolutely available, right? So if they're absolutely available, I can just say for seat number in that seats list, right? And access the actual hold the JSON for the purpose actual access the holes. Let's say that the holes, all of them have zeros, just for now. So I'm just gonna access the holes, the JSON, all of this content to update the seats that I want to reserve, to switch them or to switch the value in front of the key of the seat that I want to reserve from 0 to 1. Okay. So access the holes, and please access the memory, right? Which has all of the values in that holes of JSON, right? And get me that whole number index and get me that seats dictionary, and then search for that seat index, which is a string seat number, and once you find it, set a 1 in front of it. Okay, so once we update that memory, it's time to update the actual file or write into the actual file. So we will say write that updated memory, and we can just say that after this finishes, that seats reserved, seats, let's say seats, this is gonna be seats list, an if string has been successfully reserved, like that. Okay, so now let's go to the UI, and once we pass that test that these are available, these seats are available, so this is true, now we can call the reserve seats. First of all, let's do it one by one. Let's set the movie information. So if we passed all of these without terminating the function, this means that the movie is valid, the time is valid, and the seats are valid. So first of all, let's set the movie information, right? So before doing this, first of all, if everything is valid, then we would start with set the movie info. Okay, so using that movie ID, I'm gonna set the movie information. So I'm gonna say from that login controller that has the account and the movie object, that has the account on the movie object. Of course, I'm gonna choose the movie object. I'm going to say set movie info, and movie info is gonna take the MID, right? The ID of the movie that the user chose from that dictionary that we have made on the spot. Okay, and remember, let's see what the set movie info had. Well, we didn't define it yet, but set movie info had accepting the movie name, right? So let's change this into accepting the movie ID. Okay, and let's say that it's going to, after it takes the ID, right, it's going to search for the rest of the values, right? All right, so knowing that movie ID, I'm going to check that movie inside the movies, right? And I'm going to use the search method and give it that key and that value, right? If we find that MID, and most probably we will, right? Once we find it, if the index is something that is not equal to -1, meaning that it is there, right? Then we would set the movie name into movie.movies.get all, and get that index of the movie that we're talking about, right? And then get that movie name. Okay, and do the following for the rest of them. So this is the description, and this is the actors, and this is the year, and this is the whole number, and that's the actors, and that's the year, and that's the whole number. I hope we have done everything so far correctly. Mr. Jason, okay. Okay, and we might as well set the ID, right? I don't have to fetch it, but anyways, we don't really have to fetch it if we found it. So we can just say this is equal to that MID, right? Else, I'm just gonna have an else just in case, right? Just in case something went wrong, error, something went wrong. So this is set movie info. Going back to the UI, I'm gonna set the movie information. If we're done, let's just print a debugging message, and let's say movie is set, movie information has been set, and let's now set the reservation info. So this is number 2, set the reservation info, which is basically whole number, time, and seats. All right. Okay, so let's set the reservation info. Or how about we reserve the seats first? We never reserve the seats first. So let's first reserve the seats. All right. Okay, so let's reserve the seats. So login. I think it's this one. Yeah. All right. So let's enter the account object, and from the account object, let's enter the reservation object, and then let's enter the reserve seats. This is what we called it, right? So we called it reserve seats. It takes a whole number index and it takes a seats list, right? So let's send here whole number index and seats. This is the seats that we were sending. All right, and let's just test this and see. Okay. Okay. Let's try and reserve a movie. First movie, that's the timing. Let's reserve seat number 1 and 2. Okay, seats are available, movie is set, okay, and seats are reserved. All right, let's take a look at holes.json and see if this took effect. You should see that in the first hole. All right, 1 and 2 has been reserved. That's correct. All right, let's say that I'm going to make another reservation. Let's check the first. I just want to see the seats in the first hole. That's it. So the seats in the first hole are actually reserved. So if I clicked on 1 and 4, it's gonna tell you that seats are unavailable. Seat number 1 is already reserved. All right, and choose a different seat and invalid seats. All right, that seems to work. All right. Okay. So I'm just gonna add a couple of debugging statements. Let's go there. I just want to know what is the movie information that is being set. Like, right, let's call it something. Let's leave this for the next video. Okay, so far we have successfully reserved the seats. Now it is the time to generate a record and store it inside that reservation.json, that empty list right there. Right, so let's update the class diagram here. We just said that set movie information is gonna take movie ID. And if you remember the sketch that we've made, we've said that we're gonna make some stuff redundant in the controller, meaning that if you wanna set the movie information, you need to set it from another movie information method with the same name inside the login account controller. But that's not typically what I did there. What I did there when I wanted to set the movie information was that I used the current controller and I accessed the movie object immediately, and then I got to set movie information, right? So you can do the thing that we have agreed upon in this sketch that we've made here, right? And you can also stick to this one, right? That's acceptable in a way, right? Because if you think about it, the controller is interacting with the movie object. You don't see the boundary accessing the movie object immediately, right? So from the controller, I'm accessing this guy, right? So having a method that does the same thing that is there wouldn't harm, but I'm just gonna skip it since we have went this far in the video using these techniques. So I'm not gonna change anything. Okay, so in movie, we've said that we have set movie information, reset movie info, and all of these good stuff. And what did we say that we have inside the login controller? Login controller only has login and logout for the time being. Reservation has set reservation ID, set reservation info, reserve seats. This is so far what we have tried. Right, so let's update them in the class diagram. So this is reservation, and this is set reservation info. We also have, what do we call it? Yes, check seats available, and it takes a whole number index, and it takes as well as seats list. I'm just gonna call the seats. There's a K right there, and then we have reserve seats, and it takes the same thing. And we have finally view seats, and it takes a whole number index. Okay. All right, so that is the class diagram so far. Right, now we would want to have in the logged in account controller the method that actually does the reservation, right? And I think since we take this from the input, I mean, these are taken from input as input from the user, and this is the same, and this is the same, right? So I think this really makes sense for them to be in the controller, right? So I think I'm gonna take these into the controller, or you know what, let's just leave it there. Let's just leave it there. Right, so let's say that this is gonna have add reservation, and add reservation is going internally to have all of these values set from the inputs that we have taken. So we're gonna use set reservation info to update all of these three values. Then this is not true. To update all of these three values, right? And we would need just the cherries on top, which is the username and the movie name that the user is going to be reserving to do that. Okay, so let's take a look at how can we do this. All right, after some thought, I thought to myself, why not just have add reservation, take everything, take username, take movie name, take seats, take time, and takes as well the whole number, right? And does that reservation for us. Okay, so let's take a look at the reserve inputs first. Since all of these are determined in reserve inputs, like in reserve inputs, if things went well and the user made the choices that are valid, then since we're gonna have a movie ID, we're gonna have a time, we're gonna have a whole number, and we're gonna have a seat or seats, right? So why not just return all of these things? So let's have this function return to us. Let's say it's gonna return. Let's say it's gonna return the seats, the whole number, index, and the time, right? And let's say that actually it returns the whole number index, it returns the whole number. So I'm just gonna increment that whole number index with 1 to get the actual whole number. So this is what the reserve input is gonna return, right? And just to make things consistent, since this return, the final return, returns 3 things, I'm gonna say that the conditional returns are going to be also the same, just for consistency. All right, and now in handle inputs, let's say that reserve movie input is going to return 3 things. So it's going to return seats, it's going to return, what did we order it? Whole number and time, yeah. And time. And notice that all of these should actually be valid, should not be none, right? So we would say something like if all of them were actually existent, if all of them had values, then we would embark and add the reservation, or actually create or make the reservation, right? So now we can call add reservation. And how about this? How about, let's say, let me just roll back to that add reservation. We didn't add it yet, did we? Right? But we've said in the class diagram that add reservation is going to be taking all of this. After second thought, I think that add reservation should only take stuff related to reservation. But I don't really need to pass m name and movie name and username, since I can access them from these objects, right? So I can access them internally from these objects. These are the only things that I'm not aware about, right? And I can't access them from any of these objects. These are entered from the user as inputs. So let's say that this is gonna be add reservation, all right? And it's going to have seats, whole number, and finally the time. Okay, so first of all, let's set the reservation info. Notice that in reservation, oh, I'm doing something wrong because add reservation should be inside, yeah, add reservation should be inside the controller. Because inside the controller, you can access the account and the movie object. So add reservation is inside that controller. So let's add it here. Okay, so you have both of them, and this implicitly has the reservation object, so all is good. So let's update the reservation info, and let's say from the account object, right, get to that reservation object and call set movie information from the reservation. It's called what? Set reservation info. This is it. It's gonna take seats, time, and whole number. Seats, time. I'm just gonna have it with the same order. So this is set reservation info. It's gonna have seats, time, and whole number. Okay, and the reservation ID is gonna be created on spot, so we don't really need to pass it. Seats, time, and whole number. So this is setting the reservation info. Now let's get the rest of the stuff. So we said that for the reservation to be complete, if you remember the structure had reservation ID, username, movie name. So we only have these parts. We have time and seats and whole number. So let's get the reservation ID. Let's get the username. So we have the reservation ID, but we don't have a method to bring it back. So I'm just gonna have a method that is called get reservation ID in reservation. So this is gonna return dot reservation ID like this. And an account, do I have a get username? I have a get username. All right. So let's just continue this in account. So set has reservation. We're gonna set it since we will make a reservation since so it's gonna grab has reservation and set it as true. Okay. And in movie, do we have a get movie name? We didn't continue this one, so return self.mname. I think that's it. We don't really need get whole number, so I'm just gonna leave this as it is. Let's go back to the controller here and add reservation. So let's get the username. So I'm gonna say account object, right? From the account object, get username, and this is gonna be my username. And I'm going to need the movie name as well. So from the movie object, get movie name, right? And I need the actual reservation ID. So from the account object, access the reservation object and get me get res ID. Now, since we have all of the needed data, right, let's check the sketch here. Reservation ID, username, movie name, that's good. Now we would update the reservations.json that is inside the reservation object. So I'm gonna update the reservations object, right? So inside that account object, inside that reservation object, we have the class variable that is called reservations, right? And we are going to update the memory inside that class variable and give it a dictionary, and this dictionary is going to have these values. Let's check in the data.json. Data.json, we've sticked to the notation of un as a username, so I'm just going to use the same notation here. So we are going to pass that username. We are going to pass, let's pass in the beginning res ID, right? Res ID. If you don't understand what's going on, just watch the previous videos and you're going to understand this from the part 1. So this is res ID, key and value pairs, and name, and we have what? We have the time, right? So you can get the time and whole number, right? So let's say that first of all, let's set what? Seeds. All right, seeds, and the time and whole number, like so. And after we update that memory, I'm going to update the actual file, right? And here we can say that the reservation is partially done. Why partially? Because we need to update that account. We need to say that now this current account, or by this I mean self, this current account had a reservation. So we need to update has reservation to be true, right? And we've made just a method to do that, which is set has reservation. Okay, so we need to update set has reservation. This is gonna set variable has reservation to true, and we need to update the data to JSON. We need to reflect that has reservation, which is true, into that data file, right? We need to update this to have it like true or something, right? So we would grab that account, right, and grab the accounts class variable, and then grab the memory, which is basically the list, right, of dictionaries, list of accounts, and let's see where that index of that account, this current account, that username who have made this specific reservation right now, where is he? Where is that index, right? So we would want to find the index of the current username, the current account, right? And once we find it, let's access the key that is called hasRes and set it to true. Okay? But where is that index? Now that index is gonna be coming from this line. So from the account, access all of the accounts, and then use the search method to find me the index of the current username. Okay, once this is set, now it's time to update the actual file. So you can just say write, and finally we can just say that reservation complete, like so, complete. A successful reservation has just been made. All right, so I think that's it. That's all about it, right? Now let's try to run this script. I hope things work from the first time. I know it wouldn't, but it's just a wish. So let's try and log in first. All right, and now let's make a reservation, and let's hope things go well. So I'm just gonna pick the first movie, the first timing. I'm going to pick seat number 4, 3, and 4. All right, seats are reserved. But yeah, we didn't reflect this into the reservations yet. If you look at reservation, the JSON, it's empty. Yes, because we need to reflect that. All right, so let's do this. So what is happening is that in the UI, we've said if reserve movies has been triggered, we're just gonna reserve that. We're just gonna trigger the reserve movie inputs, which is going to ask for like what you've seen earlier, the movie ID, time, and whole number and seats, and that's it. We didn't do the actual add reservation. We didn't trigger it yet. So this is the completion of this part. So if seats and whole number and time were actually valid, right? And this is where we will make the reservation, right? So add reservation is in the controller. So from that controller, I'm gonna say add reservation, and I'm going to send, what does it take? It takes seats, time, and whole number. So I'm just gonna send seats, time, and whole number, and let's hope things work. All right, let's pick seat number 6, 7, or just save it like that. All right, so reservation is complete. So let's open up Reservation.json and see. Okay, now the username is correct. Name, that's the movie name, that's the seat that I've reserved, that's the time, that's the whole number. Obviously there is something wrong with this guy. I'm just gonna see it in a minute. Let's take a look at data.json. You're gonna see that my name has the value of reservation. It's true because I just made a reservation, right? So the only problem that we have is that null guy. Why is it null? Okay, I've just noticed that I've done something that is so wrong right there, because set reservation ID is enough to be called on its own, right? It doesn't return anything. If you look at reservations by, it doesn't return anything. It just sets the reservation ID into that specific value, right? So it doesn't return anything. That's why that is storing none, and none in JSON maps to null, the one that you're seeing. So I'm just gonna remove that reservation and start from scratch, and I'm going to remove every every reservation that I've made. Okay, and that data.json, this guy is gonna return to false, meaning that I haven't done any reservations yet. So yeah, so we are going to call in set reservation info set reservation ID, and this is going to do the job and is going to assign reservation ID with the actual value, and that's it. This should work. So let's try again. Right, reserve. Let's take the first movie. The timing, next timing, 8 a.m. Let's take 10 and 11. A successful reservation has been made. Let's check the reservation.json. Right, so 10 and 11, that's the first reservation, right? And things seems to work. Let's take a look at data.json. Now I have made a reservation. Let's break out the system and try to run again. And let's open up as Ali in this case, Ali, and let's make a reservation, and let's reserve the third movie at the 5 p.m. and let's reserve 13 and 14. These are the seats. Let's take a look at this. You're gonna see that Ali now has a reservation. Let's take a look at reservation.json. You're gonna see that the next reservation has continued from the previous one, which was at index of, or at reservation, which is 1. It has continued into reservation ID 2. Alright, so it seems that things are working perfectly. One last thing is that to view the reservation that we have made, right?